What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to make a commentary which is gonna be about the history of my online ID, I guess, with Lamora, subcharts, and also the Fape clan tag. I guess maybe I could quickly drag in Lape as a clan tag as well, given that that was something that I took as a replacement for Fape eventually with the later recent Call of Duty games. But I wanted to talk about that and also the gameplay for today. It will be some Counter-Strike Condition Zero, which used to be my main go-to Counter-Strike game back in the day when I got into it, and I thought I would return back into it for this one because it is also the game that kinda helped me get my online ID. So I thought this would be the gameplay that would suit this quick story about how I found my name. So let's start with Lamora. Basically, I had no player name to begin with. I was pretty much just named player because by default, when you boot up 1.6 or Condition Zero for the first time, you basically have the name player. I don't know why, but that's just the thing. And I didn't want to go with subcharts at the start, even though it was my username with Steam. And that was because I wasn't really sure how it worked with the name there, and I was worried if I went with that, maybe people could easily maybe hack me or something. I obviously as a kid didn't know much, but that was what I was expecting, maybe as a possibility, so I didn't want subcharts ever to be my name in game as well. So I went with player. I used to play zombie mode a lot and really loved it. And I remember playing one server one day where the admin told us few players that were named player, because when you play Counter-Strike and you have the same name, you will just get a number. So I was player 1 maybe, or player 2, 3, and so on, depending on how many there is. And one day there was an admin in a server of some zombie mode that I was playing in who wrote in the chat, all of you guys who are named player, please change your name to something else, because if not I'm gonna kick you, just so that it was easy to call us out if something was needed to be called out on. And so yeah, I obviously didn't want to get kicked. I enjoyed myself in that server, so I looked for names and I couldn't figure out what I wanted to call myself. I at start just hit some random letters on my keyboard and just went with it. And the admin was all fine with that as long as I didn't have the name player. So I was not kicked and I had a random name there, which wasn't even a name I guess, but I just had a name at least that wasn't player, and eventually I would try and figure out what I wanted to call myself. I couldn't figure it out. It took me a while, so I didn't have a name for a few weeks, I believe, after that happened, or something like that. And then one day I was just trying to figure it out. I remember seeing a cartoon series of something on TV at the time, and I remember that they did something where they combined two words into one, and I thought it was such a genius idea. And yeah, I tried to do the same with a few words or something, and I couldn't really figure it out. Still took me a while. Then eventually, as I now stared at the settings screen, because I obviously was ready to write a new name in the game itself, I basically looked at the orange Half-Life logo, because that's the default spray. And I used to love spray here and there randomly, just like nowadays it would be weapon inspecting, I guess, that has taken over, if you have the option of course in games. But back then you couldn't weapon inspect just like that, so I would just randomly spray in there if I was bored or something. I don't know why, but that's just what I did. And I never bothered changing the default Half-Life logo, which was orange. And so it just happened that I decided to, well, since I love spraying so much in game, I'll just use that to combine as a name. And the orange Half-Life logo in Counter-Strike isn't called Half-Life logo or something. It's actually called lambda or something like that, I believe. And I think it was the 11th Greek alphabet or something like that. I don't remember now. Basically, if you remove that whole orange circle from the Half-Life logo, that's basically how it looks like. So that's why it was called lambda or whatever it was. And it was orange. I think it's pretty obvious now how I found Lamora then. And I didn't really have the intention to create that name with a English pronunciation, I guess, with the whole Lamora or something like that. It was more as a kid, I think it was 11, 12 years old, it was more intended for Danish kind of pronunciation, because my English wasn't good at the time. So that's why I stuck with the whole Lamora pronunciation ever since. That is how I found it. I combined the three first letters of each, so lambda, I took lam out, or how you now pronounce that, and then orange, you pronounce orange as orange in Danish, so that's how I found it, Lamora, and that's how simple it was. And without dragging it out further, let's just hop on to Subcharles. So Subcharles was something that I had as a username for my Steam account, and I believe how I found that name was actually just because I used to, when I would greet my classmates at the time being, in 3rd or 4th grade or something like that, I don't remember now, but around that time I would say sub instead, because it was a little different than hello or greetings or what's up or something like that. It really depends, but I just went with sub because I thought it was a little different, and because of that I thought, well, why not just combine it with my little nickname Charles that I had at the time, and basically it became Subcharles because of that. And again, Danish pronunciation over English, so that is why I didn't go with Subcharles or something like that, but more Subcharles, and that's how I went with it pronouncing wise. And ever since that I would go with Lamora as the first thing, and then if I needed a backup name, Subcharles would be the other. And then as time went by, eventually I would have Subcharles Cool, because I used to love writing cool in the chat, and that also came from a zombie mode server. I remember in a Clan B server where you had unlimited ammo and such, if you would type certain words in the chat, there would be a sound effect playing, and one of the words were cool, so that is why I like to type that in the chat. And I thought, well, why not just add that to my name, since I can't really use Subcharles anymore at the time for YouTube. I had a channel called just Subcharles, got suspended due to copyright with music and such. I just uploaded music as a kid with what I used to listen to at the time. I didn't know about copyright and shit, I just uploaded so that I could always hear it for myself, not thinking much else. Got suspended eventually, needed a new account. Subcharles Cool became the thing, and yeah, since that I stuck with Subcharles Cool, and then I would eventually combine Lamora and Subcharles together into one, which is also how you see it now with my PSN name and such, if I can fit both names in one thing. I know, for example, Xbox didn't allow me to do that, but anyway, so that's how I found Subcharles and Subcharles Cool, I guess, as well as a bonus info. Let's move on to Fape, and Fape came a little later when I got into Call of Duty with Modern Warfare 3. I needed a clan tag. I had gold in the past because I was gold camo hunting, and basically how you did that was level up the whole gun to 31. That's it. So I wanted to create a clan in Call of Duty Elite at the time, and I could not create it due to it being taken already, and because of that I decided, well, then I wanted to have something else as a clan tag. And what happened was that I thought, well, since I was so good at the time, I could, when I would join late in game, basically carrying the teams I joined a lot more often than I thought I would, and I thought, well, I'm basically raping the other team pretty much. So I thought, well, why not go with that as a clan tag? But obviously it's not kinda good to have a rape as a word, I think. So I didn't want to create it because it would probably cause some problem eventually. And so I thought, well, let's try and figure out something more nice maybe as a clan tag. And I went with, obviously, rape as a word, as an inspiration, I guess, because it was 4 letters and it was something that I could somewhat use. So I tried to just take out the R at the start and replace it with something else that was more easy to go with. And tape was the first one, just because it was a word I knew. It wasn't really something that I wanted, but it was also taken as a clan name for Call of Duty Elite, so I couldn't use that. Then I went with Labe and Babe and Dape and all that stuff, and eventually I would just go with Fape, because I thought, well, maybe it ain't too far from face and all that stuff. And yeah, so I thought, well, alright, it doesn't sound too bad either, so let's just go with Fape. And that was actually also a clan name that wasn't taken, it was available, so that was why I went with that. And since that I just started to use it more and more, and now I'm just using it here and there if possible. And at the time being, when I created Fape, I didn't know that if you removed E, you had Fab, which meant something else, and I didn't know that at the time. I remember it was my cousin who told me about it when he did see me play and he saw my clan tag. And yeah, I didn't create it with that intention in mind either, but it is what it is. I just stuck with it because I kind of got used to the whole Fape thing. So that is how I found Fape and kept going with it, because it wasn't taken in Call of Duty Elite. And I might as well also add for Lamora. I also did search it up on Google, try and look if it had any meaning and such. Couldn't really find much, and when I did, it wasn't really something that was spelled in one word, I guess you could say. It was always like L-A and then maybe space and then M-O-I or something like that. it would be 2 words and such, and because of that, that was also why I went with Lamora, because I didn't think it was that common used or anything like that, where you would encounter someone else having that name. So that is why I also went with Lamora. But anyway, let's get back to the clan tag. So Lape eventually became my thing, and that is because Call of Duty later on didn't, on PS4 at least, you could not use Fate in the later Call of Duty games, and I don't remember which one it exactly started with, but it wasn't allowed. And obviously I had grown kind of attached to it, so I didn't want to go all without any clan tag into my online ID, so I went with Lape eventually because it was somewhat close, and I thought, well, maybe if you turn F upside down and remove that little extra line or whatever you want to call it, then I guess it kind of resembles Fape in a way. So that is why I went with Lape instead eventually, and that was my second clan tag I could use always if it was needed. And then I also used to have a period where I would add YouTube just because I didn't want to go without a clan tag and I didn't know what to call myself. Once I did find Lape as a second choice, obviously I wouldn't really go with anything like that anymore. So that was the history of how I found my clan tag and online names. And I think that would be the commentary for today. And yeah, hopefully I will see you guys on the next one.